Journey to Lemora, Chapter 25, The Battle of Lake Mere. We returned Kaelin to his cell without a hitch. Shayla summoned her vine stag Fierlar to carry him most of the way back, and thankfully the guard was still asleep. I thanked Shayla profusely for helping me get information from him, and we returned to the grove with our secret mission successful. I crawled back into my hammock to get some much-needed rest, having been up all night. It wasn't much later that I realized it all went horribly wrong. Tel Ahaloris! Ha! Nebunira! The Fey soldiers shouted. I woke up with a start from Anu, who leapt onto my chest, his big yellow cat eyes inches away from mine. Get the others. We need to meet with the Elder, he yelled. I got up, put on my tunic and leather armor, and roused the others. We all met at the base of the great oak tree. The Elder and Lelian were waiting there with all the armed guards. The Fae all knelt around them and waited for instructions. The Elder announced in thick Fayelarian, "It has come to our attention that the prisoner, Prince Kaelin of Aloria, has managed to escape. He will no doubt return to Aloria and rouse more troops to his cause." My eyes met with Shayla's, who was kneeling a few feet away from me on the other side of Anu, Nick, and Amber. How did he escape? We bound him tight and replaced the cell bars, I asked anxiously. I don't know. Wait and listen. Don't say anything, Shayla messaged back. The time has come to set siege to Lake Mere. With every passing day, our magic source becomes more corrupted. It cannot wait any longer. We must drive out the Umbra from the Feywood before Alorians can send reinforcements. Our time is now. The loss of Ricarian, our guardian, will not go in vain. To war! The Elder shouted, and the whole grove burst into a fierce battle cry. The Fayelarians all leapt up and started preparations immediately. There were clangs of metal as they fashioned arrowheads, and they started handing out tailored leather armor to anyone not wearing it. The wood magic mages summoned up vines for creating spears and whips. The elders addressed each outfitted warrior, chanting health and luck spells over them as they smeared colored paint on their swarthy skin. Even the children helped, as they gathered sacks of food and handed them out. There were some who wept, afraid for their loved ones and the battle to come. I looked nervously at Amber and Nick and Shayla. They all looked as scared as I felt. We had been training for a while now, but was it enough to win a real battle? Especially one where the enemy had control over all magic sources? My heart pounded inside my chest like a stampede of drums. Doubts flooded my mind as Ani rounded us together. There will be more Umbra than you expect. They have been festering there at the lake for a while now. The energy from the astral point has become tainted and negative. Do not use your magic until it is safe to do so. Using magic could have some dire consequences, so close to this corruption. You must not succumb to its negative influence. Keep each other in check and stay in a group, he instructed. Do you have any idea how he escaped? Nick asked curiously. I suspect he used some kind of magic. There was a gemstone in the hilt of his sword that went missing around the same time he did. The guards responsible at the time of his escape are being punished. That is all I know, Ani replied. It was the Black Opal. We forgot to take it back from him when we dropped him off at the cave cell. This was all my fault. I relayed this information to Shayla, and at first she said nothing. My stomach lurched into knots with guilt. I am as much at fault as you, Catty, she said at last. Our only hope is to win this battle before Umbra can overrun us. At least we learned some things. Lucian is in Magmaros, I reminded her, and she smiled a little. We also know our enemy can locate people with Alorian shadow magic. I don't know that finding Lucian this way was the best idea. That was a frightening thought. Now that he knew who I was, could he find me whenever he wanted? I shrugged off the feeling. What would he want to find me for anyway? It would be more convenient for me to find him right now, so he wasn't likely to make another appearance anytime soon. A search party was formed to find Kalen. They fanned out and headed southeast en route to Aloria, the most obvious place he would flee to. However, their search was fruitless, and they returned in time to join our march to the lake. Every abled man and woman marched, carrying bows, quivers, and spears. Some warriors rode on woven vine beasts like Shayla's stag, but most simply walked on foot. The elders watched over the seedlings back at the grove, praying for their success. As we hiked along a steep and narrow mountain path, I noticed painted rocks with Fayelarian symbols carved into them. One closest to us had the symbol for truth, which looked like an eye in the center of the sun. "What are these?" I asked Shayla, who was trotting alongside on her stag. "This path to Lake Mir is a sacred rite to my people. We use it on our journey, earning our marks when we come of age. Once we reach the lake, we learn to channel magic with the whole of the forest. Our spirits become linked. It is a special experience," she said, looking fondly around. I suddenly felt very inadequate. I didn't think my level of wood magic was good enough to be going on this pilgrimage with her people. The closer we got to the sacred lake, the closer the trees became, and barely any sunlight breached the canopy of dark leaves overhead. It was cool, dense, and remarkably quiet. The only noises came from those of us clumsy enough to step on twigs or kick loose rocks. The Fayelarians were light-footed and drifted through the woods like ghosts. We had finally reached the lake, and what I saw took my breath away. The lake was crystal clear, and you could see straight to the bottom, where thousands of glittering smooth stones of every color sat. It was so tranquil and hauntingly beautiful. Mist whispered across the surface of the lake and crept between the trees. At the opposite bank, there were 3 giant boulders with more carvings. The boulders were decorated with braided ropes, with feathers and bones. There was a strange chill in the air, and I found myself holding my breath. When I finally released it, a fog escaped my lips. We all sat still. There was no sign of Umbra anywhere. The Fayelarians began to hum, and as they hummed, the water rippled. In the depths of the lake, little orbs of light floated from the stones beneath and lifted into the air into the canopy of leaves. It was there, in the deepest shadows, that I saw its twisted, mangled face. Dozens upon dozens of Umbra were clutching to the branches like wingless, monstrous bats. The Umbra shrieked and shrank away from the lights, leaping down upon us. The first wave landed on the bank, but the second and third splashed straight into the lake and sank to the bottom. They kept walking despite the water, like zombies without the need to breathe. Their long, clawed fingers grabbed and lashed, and the lancers jabbed and slashed at them. A barrage of arrows pelted down upon them like rain, pinning some of them down into the water. Rajork swung his mighty spear, mowing down several Umbra at once. The battle had begun. Nick used his lance with a fair amount of technique, and Shayla used her bow with pinpoint precision. But when I tried to shoot an arrow, it fell feebly a few feet in front of me. I even saw Amber using a vine as a whip, lashing away at the Umbra crawling towards us. I had spent most of our training sessions using magic, or else blocking magic. I was so uncoordinated with regular weapons. What was wrong with me? I was freezing up. The hordes of Umbra were closing in on all sides, and I felt panic encroaching throughout my body. A heavy weight thudded my back shoulder, and I was certain an Umbra had grabbed me, dragged me into the icy depths of the water. I turned my head in terror to see Anu's great ice lion form, the yellow gem in his forehead glowing. "Don't give in to fear, Caddy. You can do this," he said calmly. "The words are Atas Jurata." I pulled out my key, and holding it in my hand, I shouted, "Atas Jurata!" The magic chilled through my body very briefly. The key elongated into a light, elegant sword, a rapier with a razor-sharp blade. It had a silver knuckle guard with rune etchings matching those on the doors. The pommel held the very same glowing violet-purple gemstone of my guardian key. Anu ran towards me, bending his head low, and I leapt onto his back. To my surprise, swinging the magic sword came as naturally to me as breathing. It was perfectly sized and balanced for me, as though my own arm were extended. We fought together, clawing and slashing apart every Umbra that crawled towards us. Some swung down from trees, and others made their way out of the depths of the lake. There seemed to be no end to the monstrosities. We had to find the source. "Anu, can you reach those 3 boulders?" I said into his ear from his back. I expected him to run around the lake, but instead he leaned onto his haunches, preparing to jump. I leaned low onto his body, holding on with all my might, careful to point my sword away from him. I felt his powerful muscles flex beneath me, and we flew into the air. I drifted weightlessly several inches above him as we propelled over the water, and I pulled myself onto his back before landing deftly on the opposite bank. I slid down off his back, thankful I'd managed not to cut him or myself with my sword. There were no Umbra on this side of the lake, and the temperature dropped by several more degrees. Up close, I realized the decorative boulders were covered in a thin layer of frost, and the lake water was actually frozen in places. The source had to be close. With every step, the bite of the cold grew stronger. There, on the other side of the boulder, were 2 Alorian mages. I was struck by how familiar and human they looked after spending so much time with the Fae. One was middle-aged with deep brown eyes, and the other was in their early 20s with plenty of freckles. They both had a shock of silver hair, matching the streak in my own mane. The Alorian symbol, a white sphere with 3 lines bursting below it, stared up at me on their black robes. They were surprised to see us and waved their hands rapidly around a strange tear floating in the air. It had swirls of black and white, like the noise on a screen of a broken television set. There was a low buzzing vibration coming from it as the shadows without figures passed out of it. "So you're the ones responsible for this mess," Anu gnarled through his teeth. "For Aloria! For glory!" the younger one shouted as he cast shadow magic our way, and the older Alorian continued to focus on the breach. Anu quickly dodged the magical blast, which left a large black scorch mark on the ground. He summoned another, and I noticed the other Alorian pulling more shadows from the tear. He had to be stopped, or there would be no end of the Umbra reinforcements. I looked from him to Anu and nodded. We both dodged another shadow blast from the young Alorian, splitting into 2 directions. Anu ducked to the right, behind one stone, and I dove left. Confused, the young Alorian hesitated, which gave us an opening. Anu struck the older Alorian with his icy claws, and he collapsed to the ground. I rushed the remaining Alorian and struck him with my sword. He screamed an unnaturally high-pitched scream, and all the hairs on my body stood on end. His body flinched rapidly until finally falling to the floor. A shadow wisp left from both of the Alorians' still dead bodies, as if they had summoned their own from beyond the grave. The wisps continued to seep from the weeping tear, and more Umbra appeared on the opposite side of the lake to fight our friends. "We can slow it down, but we need the one who cast the barrier to close it," Anu explained. "Well, it was probably Ricarian. He was the guardian before this happened," I said. And then it clicked. "We need Shayla. She inherited his key." "Try shielding the tear. I will leap across and get her." I drew water from the sacred lake to form my shield, which turned violet as my magic energy touched it. The shadow wisps kept seeping from the tear and swirling inside my shield like fish in a bowl. They kept trying to find an opening and pushed against it. These wisps were only half of what Umbra were. These ghastly things possessed people, corrupting them, and continued to use their bodies long after they die. The Umbra truly were a plague on this world. Anu successfully leapt across the lake, only to be swarmed by so many Umbra his icy white mane could no longer be seen beneath the blackened Umbra corpses. I was worried. The Umbra wisps filled my shield completely, so that it was now a solid black orb, and the tear wasn't visible anymore. They pushed on the shield, and I struggled to hold it. Using magic with the corrupted power source made my veins feel like ice was flowing through them. The longer I used magic, the colder I felt. It became so cold it burned, and I could feel myself going into shock. My vision was starting to go dark. "Stay awake. You can do this." Something huge leapt towards me, but my vision was so blurry, I couldn't tell what it was at first. Then Shayla came into focus, riding atop her stag. She knelt down next to me and took out her glowing green key. She formed her own shield of magical vines which wrapped around mine, enforcing it. She chanted something, but I couldn't understand. The Umbra wisps were screaming inside the shield. The vine shield stitched up along the tear like a needle and thread, and the tear closed. After a few minutes, the tear and shield holding it vanished. The buzzing stopped, and a wave of relief hit me. I was no longer chilled to the core, and my vision was becoming clearer. We managed to close the barrier breach, but there were still so many Umbra to deal with. The opposite bank was a mass of thrashing bodies, swarming all over each other like a cluster of ants. It looked grim, but the threat of using magic was gone. "The barrier is restored. Use your magic," Anu roared across the lake. On cue, Amber blasted a group of Umbra with a huge fireball, reducing them to nothing but ashes and dust. Many more vine beasts erupted from the ground in the shapes of bears, rams, and wolves. They were summoned by the other Fayelarian warriors. I saw Nick tending to the wounded, summoning a healing rain to address the ones he couldn't help yet. He only stopped when he saw Rajork fall, buried beneath a mammoth of an Umbra. Screaming, he charged towards it with spear in hand. Nick summoned a jet of water, which threw his spear in such force it pierced straight through the giant Umbra, knocking it back into the sandy beach. Rajork lay mangled and still on the beach, and Nick hastily surrounded him with a healing shield. "Ahalar, this is my warrior's death," he muttered. "Not today, friend," Nick murmured, and Rajork laughed, wincing in pain. Shayla helped me onto Fayellar's back, and we charged back towards the battle. I attacked as many Umbra as I could, swinging with my sword rapidly. The last wave of Umbra finally fell, and their corpses were littered everywhere. Cheers erupted, echoing across the lake. The battle was won. There were no signs of any more reinforcements or Alorian soldiers. I regrouped with Nick, Amber, and Anu, and to my relief, my friends were all okay. Not everyone made it out of the battle, and many Fae lost their lives. They wrapped the corpses of their loved ones with vines and leaves to be burned respectfully at the grove. The The corpses of the Umbra, however, were piled up and immediately destroyed. After all was done, the Fae performed a cleansing ceremony on the lake. They hummed and danced, and the little lights reflected off the crystalline waters. Magical energy was strong in the air. When the singing stopped, we turned to see that they had all transformed into trees. Their roots dug into the ground, connecting to the sacred lake. The trees swayed, their leaves rustling, and I realized they were continuing their song and connecting to the entire forest. Although we were not part of this ceremony, the four of us felt connected too. Amber reached and held Nick and I's hand as we listened to their tree song, leaves rustling in the wind. This journey was changing us. We weren't the same kids who left my house months ago. I didn't feel so afraid, and we were all stronger than before. What's more, we had helped the Fayelarians regain their sacred lake. Being here, at this moment, I understood just how precious it was to them. Everyone channeled their magic, and the lake beamed with the force of unity. Each of us glowed with energy, each of us with a different color. Anyu's was yellow, Amber's was red, Nick's was blue, Shayla was green, and I was purple. Every trace of corruption burned away in the light. It was working. We really could purify it. There was no need for Kaylin's plan to rid the world of magic. We are the new guardians, and we're going to save it our way. Hi everyone, it's Ella. Thanks so much for watching the latest episode of Journey to Lemora. If you like what you saw, please subscribe, like, and share the video. It really helps. And thanks so much to all the new subscribers. I really appreciate it. I will be uploading a new episode every other week, so please stay tuned for the next episode.